Star Wars 8 is considered one of the worst Star Wars productions of all time. Whether fans dislike the strange plot elements, Luke Skywalker's fall from grace, or the violation of important canon rules, it was a big miss. Which is unfortunate considering the budget and resources Disney has at its fingertips. But what if this messy abomination was reimagined entirely? Instead of the Resistance running from a suddenly massive New Order faction, we got to see something different. What if we witnessed Star Wars from the side of the Empire, a story about a Star Destroyer running for its life? The Battle of Endor, the final last-ditch effort to defeat the galactic superpower called the Empire, the same battle where Luke Skywalker defeats the Emperor and helps redeem his father, Darth Vader. Death Star 2 blows up like a fork in a microwave, and all is well, if you're part of the winning team, that is. Since I was about 12, I've always wondered what happened to the Star Destroyers in the Battle of Endor. Did they just suddenly vanish, or were they destroyed by the rebellion? Thanks to shows like The Mandalorian and Ahsoka, we know that several officers, ship captains, and even Admiral Thrawn lived to tell the defeat of Endor, lurking in the shadows of the galaxy as the New Republic grew. But how does any of this correlate to fixing Episode 8? By simply replacing where this story is told on the timeline, we can use most of the original plot in a way that doesn't offend every Star Wars fan alive. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present to you my personal recreation of Episode 8, The Last Bastion, a Star Wars story. We open on the final moments of the Endor conflict. A Star Destroyer captained by Teal Eskin witnesses the destruction of the Death Star. Overwhelmed by the sudden and abrupt loss, Captain Teal directs his ship to continue in providing anti-air and fighter cover against the rebel fleet. Perhaps not all is lost. That's when a transmission from the remaining admirals breaks in. News of both the Emperor's death and the destruction of the Executor-class Super Star Destroyer leaves Captain Teal and his crew devastated, and the order is soon given to retreat. Taking control of his ship as a now independent destroyer amidst a shattered faction, Teal orders his ship to retreat along the Sanctuary Pipeline, a secret hyperspace lane the Empire used to discreetly build the second Death Star. Just as Teal's destroyer prepares to jump to safety, a volley of ion torpedoes smashes into the back of the destroyer, damaging both sublight thrusters and the hyperdrive. A semi-successful jump occurs only for the drive to give out seconds later, ripping the ship out of hyperspace. This is where several problems would then rear their ugly heads. Not only would the ship constantly drift left due to the damaged engines, but the hyperdrive would be a ticking time bomb. With limited shield strength remaining and a tiny number of short-range TIE fighters to assist, many of them being destroyed in the Battle of Endor, Captain Teal takes a moment to consider his options. Now let's take a quick pause, everyone. The reason this type of story would be successful is due to the narrative point of view. When have we ever gotten to see the war from the side of the Empire? And I mean truly from their side. Not from the side of a turncoat or the rebels playing as spies, but fundamental Empire-focused storytelling. Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to mention that in the show Andor, we actually get to see how the Empire functions from their point of view and what they're trying to accomplish. And I feel like it wouldn't be fair to not mention Andor. I just completely forgot at time of writing of the script. Okay, back to the video. We would get to see the desperate attempt of a few crew fighting for survival amidst a horrible situation. And this is where the real trouble would begin. The main problem in Episode 8 is the New Order's ability to track hyperspace jumps, so when the Resistance tries to bug out after a battle gone south, the New Order easily tracks them down. But I think we can do this even better with Captain Teal. After assessing the damage to his ship and ordering the immediate stabilization of his hyperdrive, 4 new contacts appear on the scope. 2 Nebulan B frigates, a CR-90 corvette, and a transport ship full of ammunition and other supplies. Teal, now understanding the nature of this new battle, signals for his crew to man battle stations. For the sake of storytelling, Captain Teal and his crew are a proud bunch. Surrender is something the rebellion does to the Empire, not the other way around, and he'll be damned if he surrenders the last bastion to the rebels. Regardless of their predicament, Captain Teal rallies his troops with a good old-fashioned battle speech. With a repair crew working on the hyperdrive and the rest preparing for a desperate last stand, our story is set to unfold. Considering his extremely limited fighter detachment and the nature of the rebellion's ship-to-ship combat strategies, Teal orders his ship's engines to a near halt. With his wounded ship barely putzing along, all guns are brought to bear on their pursuers, and Teal spins the ship around as best as he can. With only 12 TIE fighters to support his limping ship, Teal sets his shields to be steady from all angles. He also commands his TIEs to play defensively, hoping to bring the enemy ships down with just his turbo lasers. This would force the rebellion to either keep out of range or make a mad dash for the Star Destroyer in fighters. An intense forward volley of the Star Destroyer's turbo lasers would strafe the chasing rebellion ships, forcing them to scatter. And due to his low speed, we would see the rebellion ships flanking the last bastion. Now, I'm not going to explain every detail, but the battle would look something like this. The transport ship is immediately targeted by the Star Destroyer. Knowing that the ship will either have to bug out, hide behind one of the escort ships, or risk its destruction, Teal fires fires on it first to see what kind of opponents he's up against. Coming under such fire, the transport ship bugs out just far enough to keep tabs on the battle, but staying out of lethal range. As this happens, a solid fighter escort appears to back up the 3 support ships from the Endor battle. The Rebellion cleanup crew, seeing the immense damage to the Star Destroyer, makes their first mistake. A fighter detachment swings in for a bombing jab. Teal, keeping his TIE fighters hidden behind his ship, launches an ambush once the fighters grow too close. With strict orders not to chase, the first wave is repelled and the TIEs return back to the ship. I'll stop combat here because I want to move on to the next part of the plot, the hyperdrive. While Captain Teal in his desperate fight against their pursuers rages out on the bridge, in the bowels of the Star Destroyer, another battle wages. I'm no Star Wars expert, so I'll cheat and pray that my plot isn't full of 1,000 holes. The repair crew, assuming you can repair a hyperdrive, begins their work. Upon examination, they realize that the flux capacitor is leaking Minovsky particles, meaning the ship is a ticking time bomb. Mid-battle, the report is given to Teal about the status of his ship. Realizing that time is against them, he begins a second phase in their fight of survival, either commandeering enemy vehicles or knocking out the enemy fast enough to hide their presence. Weighing his options, Teal leans towards destroying the enemy completely and sending out a call for help in the 2 remaining shuttles. In this brief pause, we would hear different voices of reason from officers aboard his ship. Perhaps we should incapacitate an enemy ship, just in case. We can use the Star Destroyer as a shield to hide a retreat should the situation grow dire. Teal would consider these suggestions, but for now, continues to battle. The last Bastion would turn all of its attention to one ship, the first frigate that strays too close. With a sudden and very accurate volley of turbo lasers, the frigate would be shredded in a matter of moments, a much needed win. However, second and third waves of attacking Rebellion fighters would cost Teal all of his TIE fighters, save for 2. Partially due to his ship's inability to steer or jump to hyperspace without pulling a halo reach, Teal caves to try the Rebel tactics. Steal a ship with the hope of saving his crew. At some point, the Rebel corvette would become incapacitated by the Star Destroyer, leaving a window open to capture it. But in order to avoid the overused Star Wars trope of steal enemy vehicle and escape, there's a minor twist. Teal is a very proud captain, and the thought of caving to enemy tactics to survive is cowardice to him. Yes, Teal values the lives of his crew above his own, but if they survive, it will be by their own determination. Teal then orders the 2 remaining TIEs to make a mad dash for the vulnerable corvette. Both are given secret orders to carry aboard the incapacitated ship a pair of proton charges. We would see this pair of pilots land, make a mad dash for the engine room, and barricade themselves inside. With the element of their surprise landing spent, and the forces inside the corvette too much to bear alone, the twin pilots make the choice to blow the engine room while they can, choosing to die for their comrades aboard the last Bastion rather than risking failure. The corvette is destroyed along with the last of Teal's pilots. Teal shows the audience his response to this sacrifice as he stands aboard the bridge with a single tear falling. Although he hates the rebellion and would give them no quarter in battle, he would do anything to save his brave soldiers, and thus sheds one tear in honor of his fallen pilots. Back in the engine room, a horrible shudder causes the Star Destroyer to tremble. The damaged drive is beginning to rip itself apart. Teal then orders the drive to be deactivated and removed from his ship. Worst case scenario, they'll survive the battle with no drive. After all, what can one frigate do against a Star Destroyer, even if it does have fighters? As the hyperdrive is being disabled completely, and the last frigate shying back, 2 more corvettes and 24 more fighters pop out of hyperspace. A second phase of the battle would soon develop. With no TIEs defending his limping vessel, the second battle would leave the Star Destroyer on the brink of destruction. The rebels would send a transmission to the battered ship calling for its immediate surrender. Teal, now understanding the hopelessness of this battle, orders the evacuation of his ship as he tells the rebellion to shove it. Calling the battle his great misfortune, Teal stays aboard the bridge, refusing to leave. As the 2 shuttles flee, crammed full of crew members to find Imperial help, a volley of escape pods jettison from the last Bastion. Hoping to give his crew as much time as possible and the removal of his hyperdrive left incomplete, Teal turns the beleaguered ship towards his enemy. In a valiant last stand, Teal puts his shields to minimum and his guns to maximum, focusing all of his turbo lasers on the Rebellion support ships. No matter what, he is going to take down as many of them with him as possible. Rapidly closing the distance, Rebellion Y-bombers nearly reach Teal when the hyperdrive makes the ship shudder. Knowing his time is up, Teal ignites the drive, hoping to blow it early with the attempted jump. And here's where the main twist happens. With all of Teal's men either in shuttles or escape pods, the last Bastion successfully jumps out of the system. His hopeful sacrifice turns sour as Teal makes a survivable jump all the way from dead space back to Endor, popping out in front of the remaining Rebellion fleet. Teal would then break down into tears. His last actions meant to save his men is now seen as the ultimate betrayal. Teal would endure his grief long enough to be captured by Rebellion forces. Totally overwhelmed, the once proud captain gives little resistance as he's captured. Moments after being captured and escorted off of the last Bastion, she would ignite. Now a self-branded deserter watches in horror as his ship finally blows, all too late, taking only a single X-Wing fighter with it. The movie would end with Teal standing before Judgment, his eyes heavy with grief as he's hauled off to execution. To be fair, there are some details from episode 8 that just wouldn't fit well into this story. Plot elements like the Jedi, or the Sith, or the crappy casinos. But I think that's what would make it such a good story. A ground-level story from the Empire's point of view. One that makes us question our beliefs about war. What happens when we start developing empathy for the Empire? It's kind of like what episode 7 was alluding to with Finn, but never really expanded upon. I believe that the plot of episode 8 could have made for a great story if Disney wasn't obsessed with ruining Star Wars. And the reason I have such disdain for movies like this is because of my care for the original story. I'm far more interested in building off of the chunks George Lucas gave us than cramming a crappy story into a universe just to make money. It's kind of like the Clone Wars. If you can create an entire 7-season show from a single name drop, then anything surrounding the established canon should be your focus. But anyway, if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching my silly little story. Let me know if there are other movies, Star Wars or not, that I should fix the plot to. Until next time.